Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Labyrinth podcast. I am Sister Darneasha C. Pickett, past matron of Chapter number 136 in Henning, Tennessee, and I also serve Excelsior Grand Chapter, Order of the Eastern Star, Tennessee Jurisdiction, Prince Hall affiliation as its Grand C.C.F.C. Sister Elizabeth A. Cross is my grandworthy matron. Brother Willie L. Jackson Sr. is my grandworthy patron, and the Honorable L. Lamont Banks is the most worshipful Grand Master of the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Tennessee. I have two awesome sisters with me today. Um, I will allow them to introduce themselves. Sister Vandross.
Good evening. Giving thanks to the Almighty God, who is the joy and the center of my life. I thank God for this day and allowing me to present the rich history of Georgiana Thomas Grand Chapter. I recognize my Grand Master, the Honorable Quincy G. Gann, Grand Worthy Matron Eunice J. Dingle, Grand Worthy Patron Joseph A. Dingle of the District of Columbia in our nation's capital. I am Catrice Vandross, past matron of Prince Hall, Chapter number 5, and the Grand Historian of the Georgiana Thomas Grand Chapter, Order of the Eastern Star, Prince Hall affiliated in the District of Columbia. I deem it an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be asked to participate in sharing the history of Queen Esther Chapter number 1 with you this evening on the occasion of its 46th birthday.
Thank you for that, Sister Vandross, and I will now hand it over to Sister Onyszkiewicz.
Good evening. It is wonderful to be here with these two wonderful sisters. And again, I echo past Matron Vandross's thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. I am Sister Alexis Onyszkiewicz, a past matron of Ionic Chapter number 77 in Buffalo, New York, a subordinate chapter of Eureka Grand Chapter, Prince Hall Order Eastern Star, State of New York Incorporated, where I serve as Grand Trustee and Special District Deputy Grand Matron. My grandworthy matron is Diane J. Smith. My grandworthy patron is Marvin G. Williams. And my most worshipful grandmaster is Walter C. King of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, State of New York.
Thank you. So you all have seen the flyer. You all know exactly what we're here to talk about, honoring the history of Queen Esther Chapter number 1 in the District of Columbia. And I'm glad to have Sister Vandross here and Sister Onyszkiewicz to talk about the history of Queen Esther Chapter number 1 and to discuss if December 1st is Founders Day. Sister Vandross, I will not prolong the time. I will hand the floor over to you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. You can see it? All right, the place where Prince Hall Eastern stardom began. Again, I'm Sister Catrice Vandross, past matron of Prince Hall Chapter number 5. So our story begins with Prince Hall, who on March 6, 1775, he and 14 men of color were made Masons in Lodge 441 of the Irish Registry attached to the 38th British Foot Infantry at Castle William Allen in Boston Harbor, Massachusetts. This marks the first time that Black men were made Masons in America. Prior to the departure of the military lodge, Worshipful Master Bate the Black men were given the authority to meet as a lodge and conduct Masonic funerals, but not to confer degrees or initiate new members or other Masonic work. In 1784, the Brothers of African Lodge number 1 applied for and obtained a warrant for charter from the Grand Lodge of England to form African Lodge 459. This warrant permitted them to organize a regular Masonic lodge with all the rights and privileges thereto prescribed. Subsequently, a tradition of separate, predominantly African-American jurisdictions in North America, which is now collectively known as Prince Hall Freemasonry, began to flourish due to the widespread racism in North America, which prevented African-Americans from joining white lodges that used the born free entrance requirement to exclude Americans of African descent from joining the constituted lodges. It took nearly 100 years for in 1874, the 19th most worshipful Grand Master, William H. Myers of Union Grand Lodge, in the District of Columbia. He found himself wrestling with the decision to grant women of color the opportunity to receive the right of adoption in the District of Columbia. There were many who were opposed to any decision to grant permission for the adoptive right to be given to women of color. However, after much deliberation, the most worshipful Grand Master dismissed the opposition and granted permission for Brother Thornton A. Jackson to receive the adoptive right from Brother C.B. Case, a deputy and agent of the illustrious Robert McCoy, a 33rd degree Mason and the supreme patron of the right of adoption in the world. Thornton A. Jackson received a letter from Brother C.B. Case granting him the authority to establish chapters of the Easter Star among eligible Black women in obedience to the authority granted by William H. Meyer, the Grand Master of Union Grand Lodge in the jurisdiction of the District of Columbia. Brother Jackson and brothers of Pythagoras Lodge, Warren number 8, John F. Cook number 10, and Meridian Lodge number 6, who also solicited the light and privilege of the Order of the Easter Star, began recommending eligible women, the relatives of Master Masons, their mothers, wives, sisters, daughters, and widows, who, for the purpose of organizing this first Easter Star chapter for women of color. Throughout the autumn of 1874, plans were made and invitations extended to these eligible women. Sister Georgiana Thomas Henson Thomas was the first woman invited to receive the adoptive right. She was a prominent woman of color who had for some time nurtured the dream of sisterhood for women and had previously petitioned the Grand Lodge for permission to start an organization for women of color and had been denied. However, on December 1st, 1874, in her home, 708 O Street, Northwest Washington, D.C., Georgiana's dream was finally realized, and Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 was established as the first Order of the Easter Star, Prince Hall chapter for women of color. The first officers elected to serve the newly organized chapter were worthy matron Martha Welch, worthy patron Brother Thornton A. Jackson, associate matron Mrs. James R. Collins, conductress Mrs. Lucy Mason, associate conductress Miss Catherine Williams, treasurer Miss Carla Burrell, secretary Miss Jane Cropper, warder Miss Mary Watts, Ada was Octavia Hutchins, Ruth Miss Fannie F. Welch, Esther Mrs. Betsy Johnson, Martha Mrs. Octavia Archer, Electa Miss Mary Fleet, and the Sentinel Brother Jeremiah Cropper. Sister Martha Welch served as Queen Esther's first worthy matron, along with Brother Thornton A. Jackson, his worthy patron. He served as worthy patron for Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 for 10 years consecutively. Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 is the second Eastern Star chapter to be organized in the United States, the first being Alpha Chapter for white women. It is noted that in the history books of Prince Hall Grand Lodge of North Carolina, that an Eastern Star chapter was active in Washington, North Carolina in 1874. However, at that time, the North Carolina chapter would have been under the authority of the National Grand Lodge and was not, as was the general craft in the state in 1874. Under the independent Grand Lodge movement of Prince Hall Masonry, Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 was the first chapter of the Order of the Eastern Star among women of color to be authorized by a Grand Master in his jurisdiction and to be adopted by a regularly constituted lodge. In December 1874, to submit this, Grand Master William H. Meyer and Deputy Grand Master William A. Telefero of the Union Grand Lodge received the androgynous degrees of the adoptive right and thus furthered the bonds that bind the Masonic family together. Upon this occasion, upon Grandmaster Meyer's initiation into the adoptive right, he was asked to give remarks, and he made the following statement to the sisters of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1, extolling them to greatness. May the dove of peace hover over you. May the all-seeing eye, whom the sun, moon, and stars obey, ever watch over you. May he keep and protect you in every effort to promote the interests in the general good of this chapter. The first year the chapter was active, the members met at their various homes on the third Friday of each month at 6 p.m. However, throughout the year of 1875, they began to meet on the third Thursday. On the third Thursday of May in 1875, that would have been May 20th, Queen Esther Chapter was officially instituted, receiving its charter. The chapter bylaws were compiled and printed into a booklet. It was also in 1875 that Pythagoras Lodge No. 9 presented Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 with its first badges, known as rosettes. Thornton Jackson, the worthy patriot, presented these first badges, rosettes. He wished the chapter success and prosperity. Worthy patron Jackson admonished the members to wear the badges with dignity, being ever mindful of the character of the 5 heroines of the Order of the Eastern Star: Ada, Ruth, Esther, Martha, and Electa. As he presented the badges, he said, "These rosettes are emblems of power, honor, and ability. May the cry of the widow and the orphan never be heard in vain by your chapter." The closing remarks of worthy patron Jackson are worth remembering. To you, Queen Esther and associates, the representatives of the rays of the beautiful star, and from whom comes the most charming and most prophetic and the most instructive lessons of the Old and New Testament. May you always throw an air of beauty and solemnity around all that you have seen in the East, bringing thousands to worship him. This has been the charge of the Order of the Eastern Star from 1875 to this present moment. From its inception and until the organization of the Grand Chapter in 1892, Queen Esther Chapter was under the complete directive of Pythagoras Lodge No. 9. Pythagoras Lodge No. 9 was Queen Esther's first brother lodge. Over the years, Queen Esther Chapter has been adopted by 2 additional lodges: Social Lodge No. 1 in 1960 under the administration of worthy matron Rosetta B. Jones and worthy patron Grant L. Strong, Fellowship Lodge number 26 became Queen Esther Chapter's, another one of Queen Esther Chapter's brother lodges. On May 24th, 1892, the first Grand Chapter for women of color in the jurisdiction of the District of Columbia was organized. Sister Georgiana Thomas was elected the first royal matron, now known as Grand Worthy Matron. She served this position for 2 years, and Sir Thornton A. Jackson was her royal grand patron, now known as the Grand Worthy Patron. He was installed by Sir Richard Howell Gleaves. The Grand Royal Patron, Thornton A. Jackson, then proceeded to install the elected and appointed grand officers of the newly formed Grand Chapter. At the age of 90, Georgiana Thomas organized the past Grand Matrons and Patrons Council of the Grand Chapter. Many distinguished sisters and brothers of Queen Esther have made their strides in the jurisdiction. Georgiana Henson Thomas, for whom Georgiana Thomas Grand Chapter is named. Give me a second. Sister Marie I. Smith served as worthy matron in 1905, and the Marie I. Smith Cyrene Crusaders took her name. Past International Grand Worthy Matron, Phyllis S. Bird, for whom the Phyllis S. Bird Youth Fraternity is named. We also have Edward E. Marshall, who served as the Most Worshipful Grand Master in 1977 to 1978, for whom the Edward E. Marshall Jr. Assembly number 18, Order of the Golden Circle, Press Hall affiliated, was named in his honor. The Mother Chapter boasts 4 Most Worshipful Grand Masters, 15 Grand Worthy Matrons, 12 Grand Worthy Patrons, 7 Grand Lecturers, 6 Assistant Grand Lecturers, and 1 Grand Secretary. Queen Esther Chapter has had 127 worthy matrons, 30 worthy patrons, and 4 worthy matrons by demit. I'm going to review for you for a second, not for a second, but some of Queen Esther's accomplishments over the years in our jurisdiction. During the 63rd annual session of the Grand Chapter in 1955, Grand Worthy Matron Eleanor Davis recommended, and it was passed, that the Grand Chapter's name be changed from Grand Chapter to the Georgiana Thomas Grand Chapter. In 1963, during the administration of Grand Worthy Matron Beatrice E. Perry, plans were formulated for the presentation of a picture of Georgiana Thomas to be hung in the O.E.S. room at the Masonic Temple at 1000 U Street. That picture that was commissioned still is in our O.E.S. room today. In 1968, worthy matron Arinthia McBee introduced the Chapter Project 100 and appointed past Grand Worthy Matron Marion Clifford Williams as the general chairperson, and all the past matrons and patrons were requested to serve on this special committee. In June of 1969, it was set aside for Georgiana Henson Thomas Day. She was honored on that day by the District of Columbia. February 16, 1973, a meeting was called together by worthy matron Clarice Strong to conclude the plans for finalizing Project 100. In January of 1974, Thelma B. Patterson appointed past Grand Worthy Matron Rosa B. Murray the general chairperson of the Centennial Founders Day. That was the activity that would be held on October 27th, 1974, to honor our founders. On that day, Eastern stars from around the world were invited to the District of Columbia for the unveiling of the grave sites of Georgiana Henson Thomas, which is at Lincoln Memorial Cemetery in the District of Columbia, and of the grave site of Thornton A. Jackson at Harmony Cemetery in Prince George's County, Maryland. During this centennial celebration, the grand worthy patron, George W. Romeo Sr., was a member of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1. And I do actually have a picture of worthy patron Romeo from 1974. At this occasion, salutations were extended to Queen Esther from the mayor of the city at that time, who stated that it was a rare privilege and truly a great honor to wish Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 many years of success in carrying out its great and noble goals of the Order of the Eastern Star for the women and children in the District of Columbia. So I've given all of this history, and many of you, I'm sure, want to know who was Georgiana Henson Thomas. Georgiana Henson Thomas was born in 1840 in Montreal, Canada. She was the only child of Neil Weimer and William Henson. Her ancestry can be traced to the homeland of her mother and her maternal grandparents, to the rocky and war-torn country of Gibraltar, Spain, which became a British territory as a result of the War of the Spanish Succession. England sought to fill it or staff its textile mills in Canada. And her mother at age 15, who at that time was already a weaver by trade, migrated to Canada on a ship that was loaded with slaves and other people from Gibraltar. While living and working in Canada, her mother met and married William Henson, who was a slave. Although she was aware that the children of their union would be property of her husband's owner, her fears were not realized until shortly after Georgiana's birth, when her worst nightmare was realized, when she suffered the agony of watching her husband and the father of her child sold at auction. Fearful that the same fate could befall her only child, Georgiana, she had also recently learned about the Underground Railroad. She made plans to save her money and to provide a life of freedom for Georgiana in the United States. She hired a wagon master who transported children to freedom in the United States for a fee. This was the reverse route of the Underground Railroad. The children were smuggled out by night. They were hidden in bales of hay and other materials that were transported back and forth to the mills. This was very dangerous, and a lot of children on this journey were either suffocated or captured. However, Georgiana's mother was willing to take the risk to provide for her child's freedom. And in October of 1847, when Georgiana was 7, her mother finally saved up enough money for her passage, and Georgiana was loaded or smuggled on one of these wagons. She was sent to the home of John F. Cook Sr. In Oxon Hill, Maryland. John F. Cook Sr. was a famous Washington minister, teacher, and pioneer in the free colored children's schools movement. Reverend Cook was born a slave in 1910 and began teaching in 1833. He also was the founder of the 15th Street Presbyterian Church in 1841. Georgiana resided at the Cook Farm in Oxon Hill, where she rose early taking care of the cows and feeding the pigs and doing the other necessary chores on the farm. At the age of 9, however, she was sent to live at the Cook's family home here in the District of Columbia, up on 16th and Florida Avenue. Upon her arrival, she was enrolled in school at John F. Cook Senior School, located at 14th and 8th Street Northwest. She studied there for 2 years. When she was 14, she was requested to work in the boarding houses of the Cooks, the Datchers, and some of their friends. While there, she was able to meet many other prominent Masons in the District of Columbia. On March 27, 1848, Charles Datcher had been elected the first Grand Master of Union Grand Lodge in the District of Columbia, which was the first Grand Lodge for colored Masons south of the Mason-Dixon line, here again in the District of Columbia. She also was in contact with John F. Cook Jr., who had been educated at Oberlin College in Ohio. In 1866, he had been elected the 18th most worshipful Grand Master of Union Grand Lodge. He accepted in 1867 the appointment of clerk of taxes here in the district. He was appointed collector of taxes in 1874. Georgiana was inspired by the evidence of strength of Prince Hall Masonry. She took advantage of every opportunity to learn every opportunity to learn about the bonds of brotherhood. And she felt that this could be of value to women if they were allowed to organize a sisterhood. She, again, as I stated previously, made many petitions to the Grand Lodge to be allowed to organize a sisterhood, and until 1874 had been denied. Some say that it was because although Negroes were free at that time, many were afraid of self-expression and were living under the restricted laws of segregation, and did not approve also of women organizing. Georgiana herself, over the years, had become an owner of a small but popular boarding house at 15th and L Street Northwest that was known for serving hot oysters and other seafood dishes. Members of the White House staff were frequent patrons, and she was known to have laundered President Lincoln's shirts on several occasions. She did meet William Thomas. They met and married. She was the mother of 5 children. She was a member of Plymouth Congregational Church, where she was one of the first deaconesses, and she served as a faithful deaconess of the church until 1940, until 6 months before her death, and she died at 100. She spent many years working diligently in the Order of the Eastern Star after serving as Grand Worthy Matron. So then I'll give you a little bit of history about Thornton A. Jackson, and I should have shown her picture while I was talking about her. This is Georgiana Thomas, the first Grand Worthy Matron, Georgiana Thomas Grand Chapter, and this is the picture of Thornton A. Jackson. Thornton A. Jackson was born in Alexandria, Virginia in 1846. He was a barber by trade. He served in the Civil War. He joined the Navy. In 1867, he was initiated, passed, and raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason in Warren Lodge No. 9 under the Grand Lodge of Maryland. In 1869, he was elected Worshipful Master of his lodge. He organized Pythagoras Lodge No. 12 in Maryland and served as its Worshipful Master in 1871. On December the 27th, 1871, he organized Pythagoras Lodge No. 9 in the District of Columbia on the Union Grand Lodge. In 1871, Thornton A. Jackson received the degrees of the ancient accepted Scottish Rite. He was the most pursuant sovereign Grand Commander of the United Supreme Council, Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite Freemasons for the Southern Jurisdiction in the United States of America. In 1875, he served as the Senior Grand Warden of Union Grand Lodge. In 1879, he also served as the excellent Grand High Priest of the Holy Royal Archmasons and the Right Eminent Grand Commander of the Knights Templar in 1890. In 1904, Thornton A. Jackson was one of the charter members of Mecca Temple No. 10, and when it was rechartered. He authorized a ritual for the Grand Court of the Herons of Jericho entitled The Book of the Scarlet Line, and that was entered into the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. in 1904. Thornton A. Jackson departed this life on June 26, 1909. His funeral procession started at his home at 245 Elm Street Northwest and proceeded to 15th Presbyterian Church, where the Reverend Francis H. Brooks presided. And he was buried at Harmony Cemetery in the District of Columbia. In May 30th, 1911, a monument was erected in his honor at his original gravesite. At this time, I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you a few pictures of Queen Esther Chapter over the years. This is a picture actually of the International Conference of Grand Chapters when they met in the District of Columbia in 1935. You'll see here Georgiana Thomas. This is a picture of Queen Esther Chapter number 1's officers and members. In 1950, the worthy matron was Willa Jefferson and the worthy patron was James F. Lee. This is a picture of past Grand Matron of Georgiana Thomas. She was a member of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1. She's greeting Vice President Richard Nixon. This picture is circa 1960 when he was Vice President. This is actually the then president of Howard University. I've already shown you this picture of past Grand Worthy Patron George Romeo. This is a picture of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 in 1983. The worthy matron was Lula Campbell, and the worthy patron was Nathaniel Lawrence Sr. This is one of the past Grand Masters of from Queen Esther Chapter No. 1, Roland D. Williams. He served as Grand Master 1987 to 1988. This is past Most Worshipful Grand Master Edward E. Marshall Jr. Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 in 2016. This is our Centennial Grand Worthy Matron, Jane Robinson Levant Robinson. This is in 1992. I included this picture. This is a picture of our Centennial Grand Worthy Matron with members of the Grand Chapter. This was taken at the Founders Day in May 1992. We actually, in the District of Columbia, we celebrate our Founders Day not in December, but in May. May is the date that Queen Esther officially received their charter and formally became a chapter, and the date that their bylaws were distributed to their members. So our Founders Day is typically celebrated the third, by Queen Esther, the third Thursday in May. The Grand Chapter celebrates its birthday also on the fourth Wednesday of May. I'm trying to keep all of the dates. This is past Grand Worthy Matron Diane Marshall Street. She served as Grand Worthy Matron in 2007, 2008. She is the daughter of past Grand Master William E. Marshall, Edward E. Marshall. This is our Immediate past Grand Worthy Matron, Patricia L. Young. She served the years 2017 to 2018. This is a picture of her past Grand Worthy Matron, Patricia L. Young, with her Grand Worthy patron, Ricardo L. Montague, at Founders Day visit in 2018. This is the grave site of Thornton A. Jackson today. And I'm just going to go back. This is past Grand Worthy patron Nathaniel Lawrence, who served in 1990. Past Grand Worthy patron Leonard L. Young, who served from 2009 to 2010. This is a more recent picture with past Grand Worthy patron Leonard L. Young and past matron Tamala Smith, past Grand Worthy patron Nathaniel Lawrence, with the current worthy matron of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1, Mary Beckett. This picture was taken in 2019. This is a picture of Queen Esther doing what it does best, and that's loving and caring for its members as well as the community. This is 3 of the past Grand Worthy matrons. I've already introduced them. They're visiting Secretary Emeritus Sister Velma Martin at her home. At the time, she was celebrating her birthday. When she passed, she was 105. She was a dedicated member of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 for over 49 years. This is Queen Esther Chapter in January of 2020, right before our lockdown for COVID-19. So this is the most recent picture of the officers and members of Queen Esther Chapter. And the worthy matron is Mary Beckett. Her worthy patron is Warren A. Crummer. And these are the living, current, past Grand Worthy matrons and patrons of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1. Again, Leonard L. Young, Patricia L. Young, Jane Robinson Levant Robinson, Diane Marshall Street, and Nathaniel L. Lawrence. May the dove of peace forever hover over the officers and members of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1. We've come this far by faith, leaning on the Lord. Thank you for allowing me to present this history this evening. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you, Sister Vandross, for that presentation. Yes, thank you. And moving in, that was a great way to move into our second segment for this show. And the question was raised, is December 1st Founders Day? I think Sister Vandross kind of touched on that a little bit, but Sister Onyszkiewicz, and I would like to say that the views and opinions expressed by us today do not reflect our Grand Chapter or our chapters.
Sister Vandross, that was absolutely amazing and 150% worth the wait. So let's put it into perspective. What is Founders Day? I think once you learn the history of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1, it is a little bit easier to put into perspective what people say when there is a Founders Day. The celebration and the establishment of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 should absolutely be recognized, commemorated, and honored respectfully. It is not a tagline on Facebook or on social media. And one of the things that I want to ask so many people who post these memes and these pictures of what Founders Day is, tell me the story. Do you know the story? You can ask any member of a Divine Nine organization, and I can guarantee they can tell you their story. They can tell you who the founders are. They can tell you the date. They can tell you the principles on which they were founded. So when I say respectfully, we have to understand what this means about Founders Day. We absolutely know that Georgiana Thomas and Thornton A. Jackson did not write the ritual in which we practice. However, their hard work to establish the Order of Eastern Star amongst women of color and to still remain viable a century later is certainly something to be established or something to be celebrated. But one of the things that I do want to touch on is when we have Founders Day, we have a lot of responses. Well, they're not the first chapter. There was some in North Carolina or there was some here. I need receipts. I need you to give me their history. I need you to tell me who were the people that established that chapter? Who were the people that established that grand chapter? And in the remnants of history, there's a piece, but nobody has taken the time to say on Founders Day on December 1st, when we have these very elaborate and sometimes heated debates about what Founders Day is, no one can say Sister Jane Doe and Brother Jane Doe established chapter number 2 in North Carolina, Florida, Washington, wherever, and give us that information. You can't do better until you know better. But again, about putting Founders Day into perspective, we are not trying to celebrate Founders Day the way Greek letter organizations do. We are not a Greek letter organization. We are not a sorority, nor are we a fraternity. We are a group of women that are affiliated to Master Masons, either by marriage or by blood. It is our birthright. And for us to celebrate two incredibly wonderful people of color who have established something which has sustained 146 years is certainly something to be celebrated. But again, I go back into it has to be celebrated respectfully. It has to be commemorated respectfully. And one of the things that I think is a point of pride, and it should be for all of us, is that Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 is 146 years old and has not become a remnant of history. They are viable. We just saw there's a lot of chapters that cannot take a picture with their administration full impact like that in 2020. And we have the advantage of people wanting to be members. So when we talk about Founders Day, I don't think there's anything wrong with the celebration. Again, it's how it's done. And it has to be done, and I can't say it enough, respectfully. For me, this was absolutely a learning experience. I knew some of the history, but I didn't know all the history. And to learn the history, there's absolutely nothing wrong with celebrating it, but it's how you celebrate it. And then to know that Georgiana Thomas Grand Chapter doesn't celebrate on December 1st. They celebrate according to their own calendar, and we should do the same. I know Sister Pickett is going to piggyback on that, but one of the things that we have to do in this organization is how we present ourselves to each other and how we present ourselves to the world is incredibly important.
Absolutely.
And a meme on Facebook with our emblem on fire is not presenting ourselves to the world in a respectful manner. Putting a meme up that says December 1st, 1874, Happy Founders Day with the chapter that is not even Queen Esther Chapter is disrespectful to whatever chapter that is. You're rewriting their history because guess what? They weren't established on December 1st, 1874. And to just randomly take things that you find on the internet and turn them around to, not necessarily, I don't think anybody does it with a bad intention, but you're rewriting our history. This has been 146 years in the making. And especially in the climate where we live today, it was to listen to past Grand Worthy Matron Georgiana Thomas's biography and to hear where she came from, to see where she went, in who she became. Imagine, we think we have it difficult in 2020 living as people of color, but imagine, look at what she did. Look at what Thornton A. Jackson did. And then to open up this world that was already smaller than our own world. It's a whole different society. It's a whole different group of people. And in some, I don't want to say the word secret society, but a society with secrets, that becomes even smaller, even harder to penetrate. And they did that, and they're still viable. And I think, again, we have to do it respectfully. I'm going to say there is nothing wrong with celebrating. We may want to put in perspective how we use the word founder, because this is not something that we wrote, but it is something that we made our own. And just to be respectful of how we present ourselves, especially on social media. I hear certain sororities say we are finer women, or we are women of this or that, but all of that is embodied in the Eastern Star long before you established yourselves, which should be celebrated as well. But Eastern Stars are women of modesty, of intelligence. And one of the things that we should also celebrate is we represent the entire cross-section of Black women, racially, color, socially, economically, educationally. We represent the largest array of Black women of any organization. There's no requirement for education. There's no requirement for economics. But to see what these women who come from opposite spectrums can do should absolutely be celebrated. But again, it should be celebrated respectfully. So I'm going to say happy birthday to Queen Esther Chapter No. 1. And happy birthday to those women who have continuously made the legacy of Georgiana Thomas and Thornton A. Jackson something that should be celebrated by all of us, not just Eastern Stars, but our brothers, and across the Masonic spectrum. It should be celebrated. Sister Pickett.
Wow. Definitely. I echo all of your sentiments on that. And yeah, when you talk about respectfully, of course, I always say that we should celebrate it the way the District of Columbia celebrates it. It's almost as if we are creating our own celebration for something that they have already established. Has anybody talked to the District of Columbia about how they celebrate Queen Esther Chapter No. 1? That's a part of being respectful, right? Because we know that in this particular house, in the Order of the Eastern Star, when we go into another jurisdiction, it's known by the administration there. So it's the same. If we are celebrating another jurisdiction's history, we should be respectful in the fact that we celebrate it the way they celebrate it. And I think that that's very important. I think we have just collectively taken the ball and ran with it whichever direction we wanted to go, and presented it the way that we wanted it to be presented collectively on social media, like you said, from the things that we see on December the 1st, all the memes and different things like that. Yes, Sister Vandross, could you elaborate on how the District of Columbia celebrates Queen Esther Chapter No. 1 in your jurisdiction?
On the fourth Wednesday of May, every other year, we meet at the Masonic Temple in the morning. We have breakfast. We then hold a small ceremony in our O.E.S room where we read the biographies of our founders, Georgiana Thomas and Thornton A. Jackson. It's like almost, I would say, like a church service, a memorial service. We then caravan to the grave sites of our founding members. Georgiana Thomas is buried actually in the District of Columbia at Lincoln Memorial Cemetery. We visit her gravesite and lay a wreath. We then proceed to the gravesite of Thornton A. Jackson. Now, Thornton A. Jackson was originally interred in the District of Columbia. However, that cemetery no longer exists, and his remains were moved to a cemetery with a similar name in the Prince George's County, Maryland, which is less than maybe 15 minutes away. He's buried now at Harmony Cemetery in Landover. Later that evening, we return to the Masonic Temple at 1000 U Street, and we have a birthday celebration where we celebrate the birth of our Grand Chapter. In most recent years, we've also celebrated all of our chapters' birthdays at that same event. However, some years we only celebrate the Grand Chapter, and that's a time when we honor either our past Grand Worthy matrons or selected Grand Chapter officers for the outstanding and distinguished work that they do for our Grand Chapter. It's up to the decision of the current Grand Worthy matron, whoever the sitting Grand Worthy matron is, how we will celebrate that birthday celebration, who will be honored during that period. So that's how we do it in the District of Columbia.
Absolutely.
And notice there are no
Awesome.
memes.
No memes.
Not at all.
Right.
No memes.
Right. So wait. So you mean to tell me that the memes were not birthed in the District of Columbia? Those memes didn't come from you all?
No, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
And I think that you
Okay.
can tell that I have many pictures of members of the Grand Chapter. So I can pretty much like facially identify back to 1890s, our first pictures of the first Grand Worthy matron. Well, they were called Royal Grand Matrons at the time, along the years. And I don't recognize any of the people in those pictures. I've also tried to have it authenticated by older members of Queen Esther Chapter No. 1, who may have recognized the people and maybe I just didn't, and they don't recognize those people. So please don't take random pictures and put Founders Day, December 1st, and represent it as Queen Esther Chapter No. 1.
Absolutely.
It goes back to, we rewrite our history, but part of it is one of the things that I talk about, and this is probably a very random thought, but it ties back to what you were able to do, past Matron Vandross, and that is recount your history. And I tell people, and I know the secretaries in my immediate district are incredibly tired of me saying this. How you keep your records as secretary is so imperative to how we will recount our history in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and 100 years. And it could be something as simple as a financial matter that somebody did or did not pay dues when we think about it in the immediate future. But when you read the minutes of chapters and of grand chapters, that is how you are able to tell what your grand chapter did. And honestly, sometimes when we revisit that, it's kind of that moral boost that we need, that we need to kind of revitalize, because we work a lot in this organization and you get tired. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that to listen to that history is like, okay, you know what, I got it easy. I can do this, but also, and one of my favorite people to talk about is Mary B. Talbert. And to know that the chapter she served as worthy matron did not know the things that their chapter did. They paid the pension for Harriet Tubman. They paid to have the Frederick Douglass House remodeled and classified as a historic site. That is amazing. But the thing, it goes back to how we keep our records to show our history. And it goes back to, yes, there may have been other chapters that are functioning, but we don't have your history. So we can't say that this is true, because guess what? 1874 could have been 1879. We don't know, because we don't have those records. And it's imperative that if we learn nothing else, how we keep our records is how we will remember this organization and how our legacy will be remembered. Because I pray that it is not the legacy we leave on Facebook.
The teacher of me, I raised my hand.
Yes, Sister Vandross.
I'm a great historian of the District of Columbia, as I have already stated. Can I please, if you are in a jurisdiction and you know that there are records in garages and basements and people's dining room tables and attics, please seek to find a place that you can use as the repository of those records. Howard University, the Schomburg, I'm sure that there are other places across the country that I may not be remembering. I think there's a place in Iowa, a Masonic library in Iowa. I think there's one in Florida and Texas. Align yourself with them and begin to consider the preservation of your records. This is an example of why preservation is so important.
Thank you, Sister Vandross. I'm definitely considering that, because as you all know, I have started a library here of my Grand Chapter records, and I have been to the temple in the District of Columbia and seen their library, and I just could not spend enough time in there. I mean, it's just so many records. I was like, wow, just, it's amazing. But yes, I felt like you were talking straight to me. I definitely have considered it, because there are a lot of things that are hard to find, and a lot of the records that I have found have been established through relationships with bookstore. And I let them know that if they see anything with this, they may not know what it means, but if they see these words, call me, I want it. So definitely it's something that I am considering, putting those records in a safe place where if something happened and there's a fire, then they won't be gone to future generations of that want to study the history.
And what would be nice if the relatives of our members, when we pass on, would donate their papers to the Grand Lodge or the Grand Chapter of the jurisdictions. We spend a lot of time in this organization, and it would help the organization if upon our death, all of our records and memorabilia is not thrown in the trash.
That is so important. And it's funny that you should say that. A couple years ago, we actually had a sister at a thrift store. She found a picture frame with pictures from like the early 70s of our temple. And it was just at a thrift store. And, people, one of the things that I can say is, because we're kind of recognizable faces, people will say, here, this belongs to you guys. And, we can make sure that we can get it in the proper place. But as Eastern Stars and Masons, to make sure that we make our wishes known, to say, can you please return this to, or make sure, even if you don't know who they are, just say, listen, this belongs to my grandmother, because
Absolutely.
I've opened books and I've seen like people's handwriting, and to know the changes, it's really an awesome feeling to see that. But sometimes when, they don't know that, like you say, they end up in the trash, or they end up at the thrift store, or they end up on the internet.
Right.
And that's the last place where any of our paraphernalia should be.
Right.
Absolutely. And people are selling our records to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that as well, though, because if it wasn't for some of those that information and that area of being able to buy your records, then most of the records I wouldn't have. But just the thought process of this belongs to us, but they have it, so they're going to charge you something for it. But like I said, gratefully through relationships that I've built, and sometimes you just have to do that, build relationships where you can get it, they'll give it to you, or you'll get it for little or nothing. They won't charge you full price for it. Just creating those relationships where you can exchange records with people.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, absolutely. Thank you all so much. This has been amazing. I would like to go ahead and get into our remarks. Sister Onyszkiewicz.
I just want to say thank you, Sister Pickett, for giving me this opportunity, and again, increasing my circle of sister friends and increasing my knowledge base, because this has been an amazing experience overall. Our late night conversations and just getting to know one another, and sometimes it's that, like I said, it's that morale booster, and it is that it's just that help that sometimes, that we need to keep pushing forward. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity. And I can't wait until we're off punishment so we can actually see each other face to face.
Absolutely. And thank you. I'd like to say thank you. I think I have reached out to both of you all in research, or to look at something that I've written or something of that nature. So thank you all so much. Sister Vandross.
Sister Pickett, I just want to commend you. During one of our late night conversations, you revealed how old you are. And I'm not going to say your age, but I'm going to say that I commend you for being a young woman and for having the fortitude to establish this opportunity, the Labyrinth podcast, and for reaching out to your network and pulling us together so that we could provide opportunities for people to learn about the beautiful order of which we belong. I commend you for having the vision. Like Georgiana Thomas, who had the vision for the Order of the Eastern Star. So although this is not officially Queen Esther's birthday, we do celebrate them today on December 1st. Hi, Queen Esther. And I want to thank the officers and members of Queen Esther Chapter who helped me with this presentation: Worthy Matron Beckett, past Grand Worthy Matron Diane Marshall Street, past Grand Worthy Matron Jane Robinson, and past Grand Worthy Matron Patricia L. Young, and past Matron Tamala Smith. I want to thank them for and Worshipful Marco Cottrell for the pictures that they sent, and all of the messages of encouragement. I agree with Sister Onyszkiewicz. Did I say it right? Yes. This has been a wonderful bonding experience, and I look forward to fellowshipping with you all. You know how we fellowship, Sister Pickett, past Major Pickett. Fellowshipping with
We have fun.
Yes, we do. When COVID shutdown is over. God bless you both.
Thank you both so much. And to the viewers, thank you again for tuning in to the Labyrinth podcast. See you later.
See you later.